Hello, my people. How are you keeping? You're welcome to another class of Hebrew. In the previous class, we looked at the full vowels in Hebrew, and we understood that originally the Hebrew Bible was written without vowels. So all we had were consonants, and we understood that some consonants were actually used to depict some vowel sounds. But with time, uh, uh, the system of vocalization came up so that vowels were now introduced. And for the reason that they didn't want to change the word of God, they didn't want to lengthen if they should have separate letters as vowels. We noticed that they devised a system of dots. Mainly, let's just call them system of dots to depict certain vowel sounds. Today, we are going to advance our knowledge of the language by looking at the concept called Dagesh and the Shevah. I will explain what all this mean. Welcome on board. When we started, we looked at some letters and we called them the Begat Kefat letters. Begat Kefat letters. You will recall that the B stands for bait, the G stands for Gimel, the Dalet, Kaf, Pe, and Tau. Those are 6 letters. Out of the 23 letters, we identify that these 6 letters can take the Dagesh. These dots, Dagesh are the dots in the letters. These dots are part of the letters, and they are called Dagesh lene. Dagesh lene. Why? Means another way to call it to say soft Dagesh. What they do is just to help in pronunciation, just for the sake of pronunciation. So when you have a bait, this is just a matter of recalling what we have done earlier, that doesn't have the bait, that doesn't have the Dagesh, what we will utter in terms of pronunciation is the sound V. So the sound will be like V, whereas the full one will look like sound B. So we can have B as in ban, and we can have V as in van. Yet it's the same bait. What makes that difference? The Dagesh. When you have a Dagesh, what is Dagesh again? Is the dot in the letter. Dot in a letter. And we found, as I said, 6 of these that can bear the Dagesh, mainly for the sake of pronunciation. This is also another particular letter where the pronunciation is so distinct, very, very is pay. Where you have pay without the Dagesh, the sound is f. So where you can have this one that will sound like P. So you can say P as in pan. Here we can, the sound will be F as in fan. So you can see the difference. P, F. What's the difference? Because of the Dagesh. So we have seen that these letters bear Dagesh lene. Right. But apart from these 6 letters, or in addition to these 6 letters, all the other letters in the Hebrew alphabet can also bear Dagesh. This time it's not Dagesh lene, it will be called Dagesh forte. What do I call it? Dagesh. It will be called Dagesh forte. Dagesh forte. What does Dagesh forte mean? Dagesh forte is used to indicate doubling. If Dagesh lene was meant to just show us how to pronounce a letter, Dagesh lene shows us that letter we are seeing should be considered a doubled letter. So Dagesh forte indicates, is used to indicate doubling. What do we mean by doubling? Doubling means instead of writing that letter, so let's say it is lamed, and instead of writing lamed, that's double. of the same letter. All you need to do is to write just lament and put a dagesh inside. With this dagesh, anyone interpreting knows that it's a doubled letter. That's what dagesh forte means. So dagesh forte indicates doubling. All these 6 letters also can take dagesh forte, and that will make it that we need to have a means by which we can discern what kind of dagesh is in these Begad Kefat letters. We will need to look at the principle that will help us know whether it is dagesh forte or dagesh lene. But for all the other letters that where you see a dagesh, it is dagesh forte. That we don't have any problem with that. That being said, there are a group of letters that don't take dagesh at all. They don't take dagesh forte. And these are letters we call guttural letters. What are those letters? They are aleph, ayin, he, chet. These are called guttural because of the way they are pronounced. Guttural letters. They are pronounced from the base of the throat. Guttural letters. But in addition to aleph, ayin, he, and chet, letter resh also behave like them. So, but it's not a guttural letter, but letter resh also does not like to take the dagesh. We're going to talk about those ones later. But I want you to know we are introducing the concept of the dagesh. Dagesh lene, and for these letters is only used for these letters alone. But dagesh forte can applies to all the other letters except these 5 letters. All the other letters can bear dagesh forte, which is used to indicate doubling. Now, what is very necessary now is to say, how do we know? So I want to go back to these Begad Kefat letters. How do we know when a Begad Kefat letter, the dagesh in a Begad Kefat letter is dagesh lene or is dagesh forte? How do we know? The basic way we can know is if a Begad Kefat letter is at the beginning of a word, a Begad Kefat letter. These are the Begad B, G, K, Fat. If any of these letters is at the beginning of a word, we will take it as a dagesh lene. It will have a dagesh at the beginning of a word. So we have, let's say, berit, which means covenant. This dagesh here is for pronunciation, is dagesh lene. It's not dagesh forte. Now, if we have a Begad Kefat letter in the middle of a word, in the middle of a word, and it is preceded by a vowel, a Begad Kefat letter, let's take it like that, a Begad Kefat letter in the middle of a word, is not expected to have dagesh lene. Is not expected to have dagesh lene. Now, let me coin it this way. A Begad Kefat letter in the middle of a word is not expected to have dagesh lene, except if it follows a consonant. If it follows a consonant, and I shall explain what we mean by that later. If it follows a consonant and is in the middle of a word, then it can have dagesh lene. But if it does not follow a consonant, then we don't expect it to have dagesh lene. That's one point we can make. Second point we can make is, don't forget what we are trying to do. What we are trying to do is to know, how do we get to understand whether the Dagesh in a letter, especially bigger kefat letter, whether it's a Dagesh lene or whether it's a Dagesh forte. How do we know that? One of the things we are saying is that if it's at the beginning of a word, a begad kefat letter, a begad kefat letter, at the beginning of a word, at the beginning of a word, is expected, let's put it that way, is expected to have Dagesh lene. Except if it follows, except if it follows a word that ends in a vowel, a word that ends in a vowel. And we are going to look at instances in the Bible. A begat kefat letter at the beginning. Oh, sorry, let me put it in. Beginning of a word. Beginning of a word is expected to have Dagesh lene. It will have Dagesh, but that Dagesh will be Dagesh lene. Except if it follows a word that ends in a vowel. And as I said, I'll give example. Okay. Another case, as I said, let's put this one. So, like that particular instance where I've said, let me look some instances in the Bible for us, and I'm sure there are quite a number of it that we are going to find. Um, for example, I have a word here. For example, I have this word. This is an example now. Let me see. Okay, take note of this. I'm getting it from the book of Second Samuel. Hope you can see this very well. And then we have I'll explain some of this later. Oh, beautiful piece. Right, let's look at this. A begat kefat letter at the beginning of a word is expected to have Dagesh lene, except if it follows a word that ends in a vowel. In fact, I think I'll need two examples to illustrate this. So this will be my example one. Let's see if we can get example two, and that will help to illustrate what I want us to know. Um, I'm looking at a word that begins, all right, I've seen another word now. This word is, okay. And then I have another word. All right. Yeah, beautiful piece. So let's contrast these two examples. Now let me make this a little clearer so that you're able to see the vowels. Let's look at these two examples. This is a word. You see there's a space between this and this. This is called a marquif, so this is to be seen as one word. But look at this. So this is a consonant ayin followed by a vowel, and then we have our resh. and it's pointed with sere yod. So when we look at this, we find that this word ends in a vowel. Sere yod is a vowel, an unchangeably long vowel. Then this new word that is starting is a bet, which is our begat kefat letter. We would have expected it to have a dagesh because it's at the beginning of a word. But because this ends in a vowel, that's why it does not have a dagesh. So take note of this, your bet, this is bet, but bet doesn't have a dagesh. Why? Because preceding it is a vowel. Look at the second example. We have calf, and that calf, um, all right, that's interesting. That calf starts and ends in a nun. This is consonant, your vowel, another consonant. This is a closed syllable. And then bait also opens another is a beginning of another word. But because it's not preceded by a vowel, it has a dagesh, and that dagesh is dagesh lene. So what are we saying? So what we may surmise is, so let me put the third one maybe that will bring it together. Let's look at it again. A begat kefat letter in the middle of a word is not expected to have dagesh, line, except if it follows a consonant. And this will be explained. What do we mean by it follows a consonant? I will explain that later when we discuss our sheva. I will mention that one. Now, that's one case. When it's in the middle, take note, middle of a word, it is not expected to have dagesh line, except if it follows a consonant. In this particular case, a begat kefat letter at the beginning of a word is expected to have a dagesh line at the beginning of a word, except if it follows a word that ends in a vowel. So what we can surmise is our a begat kefat letter. You know that all the other vowel, all the other consonants can have dagesh forte, and you can easily spot it, and I'll give you examples of those ones. But a begat kefat letter, we need to decide, is it dagesh line or dagesh forte? That's what we are trying to find out. What we can now say is, if a begat kefat letter, if a begat kefat letter is preceded by a vowel, it will not have dagesh line. Okay, let me rub this off so I make space for this one. All right. If it has a dagesh, that dagesh is forte. That is, it indicates doubling. It's not just for pronunciation's sake. So let me erase the side, and that's where we would. If it has a dagesh, in this case, a begat kefat letter, if a begat kefat letter is preceded by a vowel, it will not have dagesh line. But if it has a dagesh, then that dagesh is forte. That is, the dagesh is indicating doubling. I think that's just what we want to do. It's indicating doubling, that letter is doubled, and that is what we want to say. So take note of this. The basic concept I'm trying to explain here is the concept of Dagesh. That's what I'm looking at. Dagesh. Dagesh. What do we mean by Dagesh? Dagesh is the dot in a letter. And let's look at some letters that may not even, that are So if you have a letter like this, for example, let me look at this. Okay. When you look at this, the letter that has a dagesh is mem, and is not a begad kefat letter. Because it is not a begad kefat letter, unequivocally, we can know that the dagesh is dagesh forte, because it can never be Dagesh lene in the first place, because it's not a begad kefat letter. I hope you don't confuse this as a Dagesh. Don't forget this, our shurek is a vowel. It's not a consonant in this particular instance. So mem and mum, and mem in this instance with its Dagesh has Dagesh forte. Let me give you another example so that you know that all the other letters can have Dagesh forte, even though they are not Begar Kefat letter. Okay, let's have a look at this also. Have a look at this. Do you notice the letters with Dagesh? Look at it. See Yod. Yod has a Dagesh. Lamed also has a Dagesh. These are not Begad Kefat letters. So the Dagesh in each of these two letters, the Dagesh is Dagesh forte. If I am to transliterate, let me do the transliteration for you. If I'm to transliterate it, I will transliterate this as, you know, this is Ayi, and Ayi is a silent letter, so I'll put it this way. But this my main, since it's Dagesh forte, I will write double letter. Let me use another pen to make it rather clear. All right. I want to do transliteration of this. This will be mem, and this is my ayin, followed by my by irek. Then mem is double letter because this is Dagesh forte. So I'll put two letters of M. And then this is kamet, this is nu, and then this is shurek. So if we are to look at how to pronounce it, this is imanu, imanu. So we take note of that one. How do we get the double? Because mem has Dagesh, and this Dagesh is Dagesh forte. Let's take the second one, and that should suffice. This is your wow, so we can have our wow here. And this is pata, we have pata, and then yod has a dagesh, and it's not a begad kefat letter, so it is doubled. So we are going to write 2y here, and then this is the vowel pointing it erect, and then we have our lamed, and this also has a dagesh forte. So we write 2 lamed, and then we have we have kamet, followed by het, and then this is segor, then the last, this is final meme, and that is the letter. So we are now to read it. You will see what basic point I'm trying to illustrate is to let you see what we do when you have Dagesh forte. That one is very critical. We should be able to discern. So this is the potentially confusing one, the Begad Kefat letter, because it can take both Dagesh lene and Dagesh forte. So these principles illustrated here should help us to know that when you see a Begad Kefat letter at the beginning of a word, know that it's likely to be Dagesh lene. When it's in the middle of a word or it's preceded by a vowel in any circumstance, if there's still a Dagesh in, then that Dagesh is Dagesh forte, and that will help you in your analysis of that word. So here we have your wow. So wayi lachem, wayi lachem. I'm also going to make mention of how to do our syllable division a little bit later. Now, I want to mention briefly about accents. Accents in Hebrew. Accents. Every Hebrew word would have accent. Every Hebrew word will have an accent. What do we mean by that? The accent is how you raise your voice. And accent is usually on a syllable, usually on the vowel, because that's what you can actually vocalize, you can actually pronounce out. So in Hebrew, the last syllable of every word, we expect it to have the accent. That's the assumption. The last syllable of a Hebrew word shall have the accent. But some words are different. The accent is on another syllable, not the last syllable. For that reason, it's that particular syllable that has the accent that will bear the tone, that will bear the accent, that will lift our voice as we pronounce it. A good example, let me rub this off as I discuss that particular one for us. Let's have this off the board so that we talk about the accent, because it also does make a difference in Hebrew. It does. Uh, Not only in terms of pronunciation, but some form of grammatical issue we'll need to really take note of. We're talking about accents. Accent is the raising of the voice on a particular syllable. And for every Hebrew word, there would be an accent. For most of the time, the accent will be the last syllable. The last syllable. So if we have this word, which many of you might have known, you have known this word. If I'm going to do the transliteration to make it easier for us to pronounce, let me start it this way. And this, I will come to explain this. Let me just put it this way, as some people do in my, and then I put this and this, or this is this. All right, you can guess. Now, as a word, I will expect the accent to be at the last syllable. This is the last syllable. I will explain by syllable just for now. Just know where you have the last, where the vowel is to the last, that should suffice as the last syllable. So if I'm to pronounce this word, I'll call it Elohim, Elohim, Elohim. So I raise my voice towards the last syllable. That's one example. But there's no indication to show me that the accent is there. It's to be assumed, because that's the default. That's what to be expected. But in another case, I have this word, but the accent, all things being equal, should have been here, the last syllable. Let me illustrate this so that you know what's the last syllable. So there are basically two syllables. A syllable must consist of a vowel. A vowel. So this is one syllable, this another syllable. So we would have expected the syllable to be on this last syllable, but it's not. Here is where the syllable is. So in our Hebrew Bible, it will be indicated in this way. When you see it this way, this is indicating this is where the accent is. And why it has to be written that way is because normally the accent should be at the end, the last syllable. But since that's not the case, in some few words, it will be indicated for us. For that reason, if this is what that bears the accent, this is, so when I'm translating, I put it here to show. So to pronounce this, I will raise the voice on this accent. So I'll say me, me, melek, 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 melek. I will raise voice here to show that's where the accent is. So that's about accents. And this can lead us, let me do a little bit about the syllables. Since we know that all the letters in Hebrew are consonants, all of the letters in Hebrew are consonants, we would and is this consonant that are now pointed with vowels, we would expect every word in Hebrew to start with a consonant. Every Hebrew word will start with a consonant. There is an exception, and that's the exception where you can have wow, where it becomes maybe shrek and stuff like that. And that because is a conjunction, meaning and. But Hebrew word would be expected to start with a consonant. So how do we make a syllable? A syllable will mean a consonant plus a vowel. that will constitute a syllable. And this kind of syllable will be called open syllable. Why is it open? Because when you pronate it, your mouth will be open. For example, if I just have, let's say, L, this is not an open syllable. This is a consonant followed by a vowel and then ends in a consonant. This will be a closed syllable. Closed syllable, because it ends in a consonant. But when you talk of an open syllable, I may have, like, let's say, let me say I have me. This is a consonant, and following it is a vowel. So this is consonant and vowel. That is an open syllable. That's where the issue of accent and everything now comes in. Let's go back again. Don't worry, I'll take time again. I'll repeat all this, but let me lay everything broad enough for us before we come back to it. All right. Now, talking about, I think you have known that I've moved away, although it's still related to accent, but I've moved more into talking about syllables now. I'm talking more about syllables. What do you mean by syllables? Syllable is the smallest unit of a word that you in a word that you can pronounce, the smallest unit, and you need a vowel in order to utter a syllable. So in Hebrew, a syllable must consist of a consonant and a vowel at least, and that makes it an open syllable. But we can have also consonant, vowel, and consonant. That makes it a closed syllable. Now, take note. When we have consonant and vowel, open syllable, in an open syllable, the vowel in question, this vowel in question, will usually be a long vowel or unchangeably long vowel. We learned this in the previous class, unchangeably long vowel. Most likely, especially where it is unaccented, where it doesn't have the accent and it's an open syllable, that vowel will be only long vowel or unchangeably long vowel. This is a time to revise what are the examples of long vowels. We know your kamet is long vowel, tsere is long vowel, olem is long vowel. Unchangeably long are more than that. So an open syllable will have a long vowel or unchangeably long vowel if the syllable is unaccented, it does not have accent. All right. I hope we get that. So if we look at this out, the example we looked at, lek. Okay, and we say this bears the accent. If we are going to transliterate it, lek, you'll find that segor is a short vowel. It's a short vowel, yet it has considered a syllable. What makes sense is because it is accented. That syllable is accented. We take note of that. So we want to look at the possibilities we can have. So when you have a CVC, a closed syllable, unaccented, a closed syllable and unaccented will have a short vowel. If we have a short vowel, you have a closed syllable, unaccented, expect that the vowel that we go with it will be a short vowel. Look at this. Since this is the last syllable here, it does not bear the accent. It's a closed syllable because we have the consonant, vowel, consonant. It is unaccented. Segor is a short vowel. But once a syllable is accented, then it's not so fixed again. For that reason, you may have an open syllable if it's unaccent, if it has the accent, and yet the vowel will be short. You may have a closed syllable if it is accented and the vowel may be long. But the ones that are more common that we can take note of is that if that syllable is a closed syllable, that means it has consonant, vowel, and consonant, and it does not bear the accent, we should expect that you have a short vowel. But if you are dealing with an open syllable, consonant and vowel, we will expect, and it does not bear the accent, we will expect the vowel to be either a long vowel or unchangeably long vowel. All these principles will help us in discerning and making decisions on some of the other concepts we shall be dealing with. Before I pause here, I want to give us some assignments that will help us know what we what we have done so far in terms of syllables and Dagesh. I want to give us assignment that let us determine what kind of Dagesh do we have in these words. Let me do that as it's assignment for us before we leave. And in our next class, we will have a look at it. All right. And that will suffice for now. So it's a time for assignment. Expect it assignment. And the assignment is based on what we have learned about Dagesh. So what I want us to do now is to identify. So the assignment is identify the Dagesh in the following words. In the following words. Identify the Dagesh in the following words. Okay. Number one, let's have this. It's supposed to be a bit. Okay. This is your final calf. Okay. Tell us, identify the Dagesh. What type of, identify the type, let me put it that way, the type of Dagesh in the following words. Number two, I have another word here. Another word there. Another word here. Don't forget it's your final meme. Another word is your meme too. Okay. I think I'll just leave us with just a few. And then we call it a day. Great. Right, that's number four. I think that should suffice. So what are we supposed to do? We're to identify this all these words, each word has at least a Dagesh. Identify the Dagesh, what type of Dagesh it is. If you can, justify why you decided that it is so kind of Dagesh. Why do you say it's Dagesh forte or it is Dagesh lene? Right. So to bring everything to a close, in this class, we have looked at the concept of the Dagesh, a little bit at syllable divisions, and I think those are the two basic ones. We mentioned the concept of accent too. And we recognize that Dagesh, there are two types, Dagesh lene and Dagesh forte. Dagesh lene is meant to let us know how to, it's mainly for pronunciation. How do we pronounce some words? How do we pronounce it? That Dagesh lene does for us. Dagesh forte indicates doubling of that particular letter. When we learnt our consonant, we identified 6 letters that could have Dagesh lene, and it was The acronym was Begat Kefat. So we call them Begat Kefat letters. So these letters, 6 of them, can bear Dagesh lene, but as well, they can bear Dagesh forte. So the decision is, when do we know when the Dagesh should be seen as Dagesh lene, and when do we know when it should be seen as Dagesh forte? Because there's no distinction in the form. We write the Dagesh the same way. And the rules we are put is that if that begat kefat letter is not preceded by a vowel, let's just put it that way. If it's not preceded by a vowel, we would not expect it to have dagesh. But if it is preceded by a vowel, it goes ahead to have a dagesh, then that dagesh is dagesh forte. But at the beginning of a word, if there's no vowel before it, if the last word ended in a vowel, in a consonant, if it has a dagesh, that dagesh is dagesh lene. I hope this helps. As we go on, we build more of what we'll be learning on this knowledge. About accent, we found that every Hebrew word has an accent. And most of the time, this accent is at the last syllable of a word. But there are instances where the accent is not at the last syllable. When such is the case, it will be indicated in our Bible or even the textbook. They need to let us know, because this is an exception, it's different. And then we moved on to look at syllables, and a syllable must consist of a consonant and a vowel. In this case, if it's just consonant and vowel, then it's an open syllable. But it can also be a closed syllable, consonant, vowel, and consonant. And what we say is that the accent also has bearing on the kind of vowel we should expect. If that syllable is without the accent, and then in an open syllable, then the vowel we should expect should be a long vowel or unchangeably long vowel. If it's a closed syllable that doesn't bear the accent, the vowel should belong to the short, it should be a short vowel. That's why it's so important for us to know the length of grammatical. We have mentioned that these lengths are grammatical, and that's why we want to know. They have grammatical implications. So we want to know all our vowels very well, know them well enough to know when they are short and when they are long. We are going to review this again in the next class. Thank you so much for your time. The assignment we have given at this is, we have this assignment. The job is each one of them has at least a letter that has a dagesh. Identify that word, that letter. Mention what kind of dagesh is inside. If possible, justify it. Why do you think it is that kind of dagesh? And that will be a good time. I look forward to getting your your script, your assignment, and see how far you have understood the lesson. Thank you for your time. Bye.